Sweet. So, no one's turned up to the group yet. So if anyone does, I will carry on from there. But essentially, this is just the introduction to Unreal. Just full screen that so everyone can see. So with this, we are basically taking it as you've never used Unreal before. I've got a couple of my past projects up here, one I'm currently working on. And then I have this, which is essentially it's the project category screen, so you get to pick what you're doing. Are you doing something more for film and live TVs, where you can do a lot of VR production? It's designed for, like they used on The Mandalorian, where they can actually use Unreal to produce these big backgrounds. We're not going to touch that yet. Architecture, engineering and construction, that's for sort of high quality rendering. It's not for gameplay stuff, so it's more for the visual aspect. Again, we kind of won't be using that because our stuff, we want to kind of make it work real time rather than pre-rendered. Automotive product design and manufacturing, again, not something we're going to be using. If you want to look into these, feel free. There's hundreds of tutorials online that you can look at. But today we're going to be starting with games. So click on games, and there's a little green button at the bottom here that says next. So you get a selection of templates. So Unreal comes with a couple. So it comes with a very basic first-person shooter template, which the main character has a gun that fires like a big ball things, and so a couple of physics assets you can kick about. It's not multiplayer. It's not pre-built, so you can just drop in and make your own Call of Duty. It's not built like that. Flying is basically you're a little UFO, and it's very basic controls. These are designed essentially to give you a very rough, like if you wanted to, if you knew a little bit more about blueprints, you could go in and maybe bash out an idea or bash out a mechanic. Handheld augmented reality, so this is designed for phones, where you can basically point and shoot, have augmented reality, kind of like the thing in Pokemon Go, where you can see the Pokemon in real life. It's designed around that, but you can put your own stuff in. Puzzle games, again, these are all very self-explanatory. Rolling is all physics-based. Side-scroller, even though it's in 3D, it's designed so you can have some basic platforming and jumping and whatever built in. 2D side-scroller, so that's constantly running. Third person, so this is like running around. Think of like maybe a Banjo-Kazooie or a Super Mario 64 type game, any of the modern 3D Mario games. Top down, again, these don't really need much explaining. Twin stick shooter, so you're running around as a little UFO again, and you're shooting objects. Vehicle, it's very, very basic. Don't think you're going to be able to just go in there, design a Mario Kart, and then be able to produce the next Mario Kart game, because it doesn't work like that. These are very, very stripped back. Virtual reality is designed with the Oculus Rift in mind, where you can actually design the level in Unreal's VR setup, as well as design a game for VR, and then vehicle advanced. This is a little bit more advanced. This is where you can kind of tinker with some stuff. There are a lot of tutorials online on what you can actually do with this. But I say, if you're going to look into this, I would suggest maybe looking into one of the tutorials, because they have a lot more for you to actually use. And then Blank, which is the project, which is very nice and clean, and we're going to go for that. So this is the project settings. So this allows you to change how your project's actually going to run. So you could either go with Blueprint or C++. If you're feeling like you want to program everything, C++ is your thing. If you want to go with Blueprint, you want to just start nice and quick, Blueprint's your way forward. Scalable quality settings. This is where you get to choose whether you want to scale, scalable 3D and 2D, or you want to go for maximum quality. We like very pretty things here, so we're going to go for maximum quality. Ray tracing enabled or disabled. If you've got a card that can run ray tracing, you can actually turn it on and off. It doesn't really impact frame rate until you actually turn it on. But disabled basically means you can't turn it on ever. So because I don't think everyone here has a ray tracing card, it's disabled. I will enable it just so I can show you in game what it does. Desktop and console, or you can set it up so it's like a target hardware. There are more detailed settings in project settings itself, but for now, desktop and console, that's what we're working with. And then starter content. If you want a very nice, clean, fresh start without much stuff in it, you go for no starter content. And then if you want it to actually run properly, or you want to have some stuff just to mess around with, go for starter content. For now, we'll go with starter content. At the bottom is where it's going to be stored, so I'm going to store it here. I'm just going to call it intro. So this is the folder, and then this is the name of the project. We go to create project. It's going to show you my lovely, amazing desktop background, and then it's going to load up. This could take, depending on how fast your computer is, this can take anywhere between a few seconds and a minute or two while it basically pulls all the assets, creates all the code in the background. It does this every time you start a new project, by the way, so don't go thinking, I've done it once, I don't have to do it again. It will once you've opened a project, it will just open it, but if you then create a second project, it will have to go through all this again. So don't worry too much about being precious with it, because wasting it. If it does take a long time on your computer to set one of these up, maybe go set one up and then come back 5 minutes later. There you go. So this is Unreal. It's probably one of the most daunting user interfaces. You'll get things like this popping up because it's compiling shaders, which is basically the engine's trying to work out custom shaders and stuff they've built. So the material graph, which we'll get into eventually. So manage plugins. Unreal does come with a couple of plugins. These are some of the ones I've got, but it does come with a couple more. I'm just going to close that for now. Wait for this to finish compiling, and then we'll go and start looking at the interface. So this is basically your viewport. So this is where you see the world. It has similar controls. You can move around, zoom in and out. It has different controls to sort of what you're maybe used to with like Maya, because if you hold down the right mouse button and then use the WASD keys, WAS and D, you can actually fly around. So it is kind of like a game, which I think is pretty cool, because the people who would be doing this are mostly probably PC gamers, and this is a very natural control scheme for everyone. But if you don't feel like you can do that, you can actually use the right mouse button to look around, the left mouse button to pull yourself forwards and backwards, and then you can also zoom in and out with the scroll wheel. So there are multiple ways of getting around here, but I like using the WAS and D keys. So this is the viewport, as I said before. You've got a couple of different views. You've got perspective. You can see down from the top, you can see from the bottom, you can see left, right, front, back, whatever. In these views as well, it'll automatically default to wireframe, but if you want it to just look like it normally is, you go to this next button here, which is lit, unlit, which we'll go back to perspective for. So this is the lit, which basically means all the lights have, when you've calculated all your lighting, it'll show you what it looks like. Unlit shows you what the materials are, just pure diffuse. There's no, normals or anything showing up on them. It's just what the color is. It's basically what the game engine would look like if it was, unlit. Wireframe, detailed lighting, so this shows you sort of what the lighting is actually doing. The next one is lighting only. So lighting, the difference between detailed lighting and lighting only is detailed lighting will show you what specifically, like with normal maps and everything else is going on, whereas if we go to lighting only, it shows you just specifically what lighting is doing. Reflections, so this shows you what your reflections are going to look like. As I said, it looks at that weird episode of SpongeBob where everything's made of chrome. Don't run this if you're on a really low-end machine, purely because it probably will tank it. Player collision, so this shows you your collision boxes. So if you were to want to see, okay, where can my player interact? Well, you can see what it's going to hit. You notice how the chairs are not meant for sitting, because they, even though they are this shape and you've got the, the actual backrest and everything here, if we go apply collision, it's actually set as a box. We will be looking at how to set custom collisions later on. Visibility collisions, so again, this is what is visible on screen. So if you notice how even this, which is made of glass, if we go back to lit, you can see through it, and then this is what is visible on screen. And then path tracing, which is the ray tracing world. Doesn't look that much different from lit, but it will do in a bit when I show you what the difference between what rasterized and path tracing is, which is kind of the two. You'll probably see them as the two bigger lighting terms for the time being. So this is the basic viewport. This is where you can drag and drop all your items. This is where you start setting your building up. You do have the gizmo, as you do in Maya. You know, up, down, left, right. Scale tools in this one. I think W is move, E is rotate, and R is scale. I don't know why it's that way around. Unreal just likes to be weird like that. On the left, you've got the 5 major modes, or like, I want to say they're like the creative modes. So you've got place, which is you can put objects in. So you've got your basic items. So this is like empty actor, which is just a standard thing for your blueprints. You've got cube, which is, again, you can just pop a cube in. You can't 3D model it like you can inside of Maya. This is just there just in case you wanted to have maybe something to block a path for while you're testing something out. You got spheres, cylinders, cones, planes, box triggers as well. This is more for your blueprint stuff. So if you're wanting to maybe, I don't know, when the player gets to this point, you can actually have it so when the player collides with this box trigger, you hit this. Someone's just entered the chat. I've just started the video, so if you missed the intro, it's absolutely fine. I'll be putting that up on Classroom in a little bit and on the Facebook group. So yeah, this is a box trigger, nice and cool. And then sphere trigger, pretty much the same thing, except it's round. Huzzah! Lights. There are 5 types of lights. There is a presentation on this I will put on Classroom for you guys, but very, very briefly. So directional light is basically the big sunlight. That's why it's a picture of the sun on there. It is a light that doesn't have really any volume. It just constantly lights everything in the scene. A point light. So this is your standard light, really. It just glows in every direction it can. Spotlight will literally point at a spot, and you can actually adjust all the cone settings and how focused you want it to be, etc. from there. Rectangular lights, this is designed mainly for if you're doing, I don't know, maybe a subway or something like that, and you want like an actual shaped light rather than just a completely, completely round one. You want it to actually look like the shape it is. And then skylight, which is this, so it creates a general nice feel and gives you actual, light in your scene. If we turn the skylight off, again, nothing really changes at the minute. If you turn the light source off, you can see there is a directional light there. Skylight. If we build lighting, which I don't really want to do at the minute, you will see everything will probably just go black. Cinematics, this is all your camera stuff, so when you're creating in-game cinematics, these are your cameras. This is also for when you're doing more VFX stuff, so you can actually create a camera rig and a crane inside the engine, so you can actually create a path that can be constantly followed and refollowed and refollowed the whole time. Visual effects, these are sort of like atmospheric fog, adding decals. So decals are like if you're making, say, a wall, for example, and you wanted to add graffiti, you wouldn't add that to the texture map. What you do is you add it as a decal, whatever anyone wants to call it. I call them stickers. Add it as a sticker, and what that does is it will apply over your material without actually affecting your material. So you can place it, you don't have to then go back if you don't like the texture size or you don't like the design, you don't have to go back and completely do all of your material for the brick wall. It allows you to then use smaller materials for your brick wall, tile that, and then you can add stickers to break it up. It's a really effective way of making very little texture size into a, having a very small texture bit. Rather than having an 8K texture map for one wall, you can use the same brick pattern and just change it over and over again. Decals don't have to be like, full stickers. They can be, water drips, or they can be like the normals have changed, stuff like that. Atmospheric fog is exactly what it says. It's fog that's very atmospheric. Planar reflections, this is more explained in the presentation I've got for you guys, where normal reflections will actually just take a camera view of what you can be seen on screen. It's called screen space reflection, whereas a planar reflection basically uses like a camera and will look at everything underneath. Sphere reflections are, again, very same thing. Box reflections, exponential height fogs, this basically gets, it gets foggier the higher it goes up. Geometry, so this is your basic geometry. These used to be called BSPs, which is a binary space partition. These are essentially blocks that you can actually kind of somewhat shape in Unreal. So if you want to turn all these off, you just press G in the game, editor window, and it will turn it all off. It's called toggling game mode. So this is a BSP square. It's also called a geometry square. If we go to this last tab here, what we can do is we can actually edit it a little bit. So if we wanted to, I don't know, maybe pull this down and then pull this one down as well. Don't know why you would do your modelling inside of here, because this is very, very expensive to do so. You can do in there, but if you're in a bind and you need to just block something out super quick, you can do it with that. You've also got like stairs as well, which is very, very useful because they're typically designed to fit most characters. They'll just climb up. Volumes. This is more again to do with your blueprint work. So again, trigger volumes, pre-computed visibility, so you can maybe turn stuff on and off. So when you're in a certain area, things will pop up or things will turn off. Pain-causing volumes. This is like, you know, lava, and you know, if you're in acid in a game or whatever, you can set that so it sets a set amount of damage for whatever, rather than programming all of the water to do damage. Audio volumes, very, very. They're actually labelled pretty well. Light mask comes when we talk about lighting itself later on, and then this is all of them in one thing. I like using these though because it keeps them nice and safe. Painting. So this is painting for the environment, so you can actually paint materials. You can paint, you know, on Unreal's stuff, you can actually paint materials. We typically don't do that. You can also paint weight and textures, purely because we want more control. This is very, very sort of haphazard with it. I need to look more into the tools myself because I've not used them in a couple of years, because I kind of prefer using actual texture maps and making my stuff myself. Landscaping, so you can actually generate your own landscape. So landscapes are essentially what they are, is a level. So if we move this down just a little bit and then we generate, we create that, what it's going to do is it's going to create this as one sort of big mesh. See all these squares, they are exactly what they look like. What this allows you to do as well is, if we zoom out a little bit, is say I wanted to sculpt some mountains, I can actually do so. Let's pull the strength up a little bit, brush fall off. So if I wanted to, I don't know, paint something around the player here, I could paint in this mountain, and then you can smooth it down with the shift tool. You know, it's, if you wanted to just create something like that, so then if we hit play, we can kind of see that we've got these mountains in the background. Again, it's a tool that you will want to spend a lot of time using before you start, you know, actually using it in level. You want to start playing around with it. You can actually import a height map as well. So if you have a specific height map in mind, or you've generated one in, say, Mudbox, you can actually bring that in. So if you've sculpted the perfect mountain, you can bring that in and it will actually generate it over the top. Foliage tool. So rather than placing every individual blade of grass in the level, what you can actually do is just go foliage tool, dump all of your grass trees in here, and then you paint them into the areas you want. And what it'll do is it'll randomly scatter them. You can turn it on so it will randomly rotate them so they don't all look the same way, randomly scale them within a set amount. So you don't want all your trees being the same height. You can have them so maybe they'll be, some will be slightly bigger, some will be slightly smaller, you know, some will be slightly thicker, and you can do all that with this, and it just automatically does it. Just be careful, you don't want to paint everything too dense, because grass, surprisingly, if you put a lot of it in a level, will absolutely tank your frame rate. Don't do that. And this is the BSP editing tools. So this is, you know, you can triangulate, you can optimize it, so if you make something and you want to just add it all together, you can just do that. I'd suggest maybe not touching this for the time being. If you want to have a go with it, please do. But if you want to make a shape, I would suggest getting the character out of Unreal. I will put that up on Classroom for you guys if you want. Pull him out and then build your stuff around the shape of that, because he's approximately, I think, 6 foot tall, so he's 180 centimeters. So if you start building stuff to a 2 meter by 2 meter scale, you're roughly going to be the same shape. So we've got all that. This bit down here is the content browser. So this is where all of your items are going to be. It's nice and straightforward. I like to normally pop it on my second monitor, but because I'm recording on one today, just so you guys can see everything, I'm not going to do that. Before I go into detail on this, I'll just have a look at these two. So this is the world outlier. This is everything that's in your scene. This includes audio. So if you've got background audio, it'll be in there. All your player starters, all your light sources, they'll be in here. Any reflections you've got, sky and fog, all your static meshes, skeletal meshes. If you've got any volumes, so if you've got any lighting or any trigger volumes, they'll be in here. So everything can be in here. You can add labels, you can put them in folders. If you keep it organised, it's very, very useful. If you don't keep it organised, it can be an absolute pain in the neck. Details panel, exactly what it says, it gives you the details. So if, for example, I wanted to, I don't know, make this chair exactly 3 times the size, I can go into the details panel and go 3, and now it's 3 times wider, and it looks incredibly uncomfortable. Just undo that, that's absolutely fine. You can change objects to static, stationary and mobile, so most static objects, as with lights as well. Static objects basically can't be moved in game. It allows for baked lighting and it's a lot faster. Stationary objects, they can be changed in game, so they're not moved, but essentially you can maybe change the colour of them. And then movable objects, they cast totally dynamic shadows, but they take a lot more power to actually render. You can, if you wanted to, say for example, change this here, whatever this sculpture is on top of the table. If I wanted to change that to something else, I could actually do that from here as well. So you can, or if I wanted to find out where it is, you click this little icon here, it'll take you to where it is inside your content browser. Maybe I want to swap it with this rock, and just right click. So if you highlight it in the content browser, right click, replace with rock, and it'll replace it. I'm going to undo that because that's a big boulder. Details panel as well has all of your physics settings as well. So if you want to make the, you want to simulate physics, so say maybe you had a first person shooter and you wanted to be able to shoot things, you can do that from here. So if you wanted to make maybe one heavier or one lighter, you can change all that individually. You don't have to go into code to do that. I mean, I would recommend doing that, but if you would rather do it here and change it on the fly, you can do that. Collision allows you to adjust collision very, very, very quickly. Rendering, so you can turn it on and off. You can allow hidden in game. There's not a whole lot of details. Some stuff that'll probably go a little bit over your heads for the time being whilst you're getting used to everything. And then we get to the main one. You've got your buttons at the top as well, so let's talk about this. So you've got save. Save is very important because Unreal will have a tendency of, if you've done a lot of work, it will crash. It just does. It just hates people. Save as much as you can. Content, so you can go to the marketplace. There's a lot of free stuff on the Unreal Marketplace that I recommend you check out. If you haven't already, when you download Unreal, download the Paragon assets, which if we click on Marketplace, it should just pop up in a new tab. Or is it under Content? Oh no, it's hidden. Never mind. I'll show that later on. Settings, these are just all your settings for in-game, so you can turn it off so all the volume's turned off. You can adjust the world settings, you can set your materials to be super high, etc. Blueprints, this is where you can open up your blueprints or look at them and edit them specifically. Cinematics, exactly the same thing. Build is where you can change all of your building options, so you can build lighting, you can adjust the lighting quality. For the time being, kind of stick with preview, because you don't want to be spending forever doing everything at production, because that takes so long. I think it's like 6 or 8 times longer. It's a lot better result, but you do that right at the end of a project. Don't do that at the start. Build reflection captures. What this does, it takes all the reflection captures, so you square, sphere and whatever, planar, and what it do is it will update their reflections, so you don't have to constantly update them. Just do it at the end so you can have a look, and then if there's any adjustments you can change it. Build geometry, so if you've added stuff in, like with the geometry tools here, this will then add all of its collision. It will make sure everything's correct. It's all pretty straightforward. It's just, it kind of looks overwhelming because there's so many new things in here, and it's not like a typical Maya layout. You can actually change the window here as well. So if you want to minimize, you can see all the 4 as if in Maya. I like sticking with this one because I don't, unless I'm doing very specific movements, I don't use these 3. And again, if you wanted to see something that's a little bit faster, unlit's always faster than lit, because lit mode is actually trying to computate all the light, so that's fine. Going back to the content browser. So content browser, if you're organised with this, you're going to have a good time. If you're not organised with this, you're going to have a very bad time. Start content, this is the stuff we started at the beginning. So see how they've labelled all their stuff? Kind of do that. I'd say make a new folder. It's very straightforward. Just right click and you go to add a new folder. And there you go. So I'm going to call this my stuff. Just like that. So I can go in here and then I can create more folders. There's a set amount of folders within folders within folders you can do. So don't think you can just keep making folders and folders and folders. Try and keep it organised as best you can with a decent labelling system. Don't just go like my stuff, images of cats, images of fat cat. You know, don't keep going into subcategories like that. You want to try and make sure you can see everything. So if we go back to the start content, they've labelled everything like this. You've got stuff like architecture. This is like very basic windows and doors that they generate for people. And then the quick tip as well, if you want to ever slam something to the base, you press end, it will generally drop in place. Like that. And then if we click play, there we go. So how I did that was, you can just take anything from here. So if you've ever put anything in to the content browser, you can literally click, drag it, and it will drag it into scene. You can also place it if you want, but I think this is a little bit easier because typically you're wanting to go, oh, I want to add something to here, and then you can just duplicate it. If you hold Control or Alt, Control will move it. You can do it without Control, but Control gives you a little bit more ease. Shift will move the object around the scene rather than, you know, moving it within the scene, so you can adjust it very specifically with it in camera view. And then Alt, if you hold Alt and move it, it will create a copy, and it actually updates the world outlier as well with the details. If you're wanting to add objects in, that's very straightforward. I'm just going to pull up one of my objects now. So if we go to my models, let's have a look. So I've got the actual Unreal mannequin here. All I'm going to do is go to my file in the content browser, my stuff, go to this, and literally all you can do is you can click import, go to the file, you can do that. If you've got multiple, if you've only got one, nice and simple, you just click and drag, wait till this little icon that's like a box with a plus in it, it will import it, it'll give you the import settings. You can import OBJs, you can import FBXs. It's really up to you. I'd say keep it as FBXs for the time being. If one of them doesn't work, try as an OBJ. You can make sure that the object comes in a specific way. So if you've got an OBJ that's got maybe multiple parts, you can combine them all. If it's got materials, you can get them all assigned in. You can import the textures. I'm just going to click import for now. Because it's a skeletal mesh, it'll have its skeleton as well. And then I can drag and plop him in there. And if I want to rotate him, beautiful. There we go. Now, with Unreal, you've also got the Unreal Material System. I won't go into too much detail with that today, but I'll just show you super quick. So he has two materials. Don't know why he has two. Just pop that on there. Just delete that one. Cool. Right. So this is the Unreal Material System. You can actually get away with certain materials not actually needing texture maps, which is pretty cool. You've got your reference grid here. You can change it to a cylinder if you want, or a plane, or a cube, or a teapot. You can put a custom mesh in if you want, but they've represented that with a teapot for some reason. So what we'll do is, if you have a look at this, it's probably a lot nicer than what you've seen inside of Maya, because it actually has everything labelled and you can just click and drag stuff in. So with Unreal, they actually use a thing called shader parameters. So if you wanted to make something without texture maps, save yourself some time, you know it's going to be, I don't know, maybe a pink plastic. that's quite shiny. You can do that with just pure numbers. You don't have to actually worry about making a pink material map set for that. To do that, we use a thing called constants. So if you hold down 1 on your keyboard and then click anywhere in this grid pattern here, you'll get a constant generated, which is called a 1 constant. If you hold down 3, you get a 3. If you hold down 4, 4. If you hold on 2, you get 2. Primarily for colours, we want to use this, the number 3 constant, because it actually acts as the RGB channels. So if we plug that in, you'll notice how this turns all black. I'm going to generate another constant, just so we can do that. I'm going to set this to 1, which can be adjusted on the left-hand side, and there we go. So we've currently got this set to black. Now we click in this bit here, and you can actually adjust the colour to whatever you want. So I'm going to make it super bright pink, because why not? And it will update. Once it's calculated it, it will update. If we go to path tracing, does nothing, cool. So at the minute, all we're saying, because we've only got one thing plugged in, all we're saying is this material is pink. We're not saying what metallic value, specular value. What Unreal tries to do is it tries to actually sort of even it out, maybe come up with a random number generator, or rather just gives it a mid number. So it normally goes for a 0.5. It'll try and guess. What we're going to do is we're going to say, right, 0 and 1, these are absolute numbers. You can actually increase these beyond 0 and 1, but for now, for materials, these couple here will not go above 0 and 1. So what we're going to say is, right, because it's plastic, we're going to say it doesn't have a metallic value, so 0. So it hasn't really changed much, but we're going to say that it also has no roughness, so it's going to be really super shiny. And notice how that updated the reflectiveness of that. If we were to then say, ooh, well actually, if I break these links here, so I'm going to say, well actually, it's a metallic, so I'm going to say it's 1 for metal. It looks a little bit different if we change that back to the 0. Notice how the colours already, like, they look a lot more flat, whereas with the metallic you can kind of see that it's starting to pull out like where the light direction's coming from. We're going to say it's got 0 roughness as well, and there we go, we've got a pink metal ball there. If we say we'll create another constant here, we'll go for, I don't know, maybe in the roughness value we'll go for maybe a 0.2. So it's slightly rough. You can see how it's starting to fuzz it all up. You can actually adjust these in engine as well, so when you're in the viewport you can actually do that. Someone put a message on the group, no, cool. So you can actually adjust these on the fly. What you have to do is you have to right click here and then click convert to parameter. What this allows you to do is it allows you to create a thing called a material instance, which you can actually change on the fly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set all these to parameters, just so we can show you what we do. So convert these parameters. You don't have to do this for everything, but it just makes it a little bit easier for demonstration purposes. So parameter 1, I'm going to call this color. Ooh, when it wants to change. Color, and change this to metallic. And we're going to change this to roughness. You can actually add in texture maps as well, which is again very straightforward, the exact same process for importing stuff. You literally drag and drop it into your content browser, and then you can, if you wanted to, let me have a look, see if I've got any texture maps available on a normal that we can use. Yes, I do. So I've got this grid pattern, which I'll just pop in there. Sweet. So what I can do, just open this up a little bit. I can just drag, drop, and then I go create a texture sample. If you're wanting to do anything with this, you can do. So if you wanted to just use the red channel, you can just use the red channel, which doesn't do a whole lot. It actually makes it look like some sort of Eldritchian nightmare. But if you're using all three, use the RGB slider and just click it into place, and there we go. I think that's a little too big. I want to scale that down to it's a little bit smaller. So there's a very straightforward way of doing this. Hold M on your keyboard to multiply. I'm going to put a constant in, plug that into B, plug that into A, plug that into normal. I've done that the wrong way around. That goes in there, that there. That goes into UVs. Break the connection there. Break. Where are you? So you need a texture coordinate node, plug that into A. And currently if you've got it set at 0, means that it's going to have no UVs. If I set this to 4, it's going to duplicate it 4 times. So what it's doing is it's essentially taking my original texture map, not decreasing the value of it at all. And what it's doing is it's tiling it 4 times. So if I was to say this to, I don't know, 16, it'll make it really small and really detailed. So you can do this with bricks and everything else as well, so it's not a massive issue. For now, we'll go for 2 just so you can see it. We're going to keep it as that, but again, I can always just adjust that. Convert to parameter. We're going to call this material. Ooh, if I can type in the box. Material tiling. 2 seconds. I think I've just heard the door downstairs. Sweet. I'm back. So with this, I'm going to set up material tiling. We should be ready to go. So I'm going to apply all that. Now with this, because we're going to call this like our master material, okay? So decrease or minimize that. Our guy is now looking super fabulous. But what we're going to do is we're going to click on our main material, right click, create material instance, and apply that instead. Doesn't show any difference. But if we go into here, like this, so we're just going to make it so this is where 2 monitors is really helpful. So we have this like this. What we can do is we can change the colour on the fly. So you tick the little box and change the colour. So maybe I want to make him more blue. It'll adjust. And then maybe I want to, I don't know, increase the material tiling. It will actually tile it on the model so you can kind of get an idea of what you're doing. So maybe we can turn the metallic down to 0 or make it, really metal. If you notice how once I go above 1, it doesn't actually do anything. And I'll show you with roughness as well. So we'll keep that at 1. And then roughness, we can make it super rough or we can make it super shiny. Again, once you get past 1 and 0, it doesn't really do anything. Once you get past 1 in terms of roughness, that would basically be so rough no light can actually escape it and it would just look like a black hole. Because that's not physically possible, unless we're using stuff like Vantablack, Unreal's programmed to make sure that even if it's set to like the highest roughness, it will still be visible, which is cool. So, as we can see, we now have this weird figurine thing, and we're going to just increase our tiling a little less, just so we can see it. That'll do. That's cool. So, we'll save that. If I want to make another material instance of that, we can just make another material instance and maybe change it to, I don't know, green. Click on the box, green. We can just drag and drop that onto his little chest plate. And then if I zoom in really slowly, notice how its tiling is like ridiculously small. Go in and maybe change the material tiling on that so it looks more in tune. This is where correct UV placements would be brilliant. You can see how there's a lot of stretching. This isn't my model, but it's the one built into Unreal. But we're going to stick with that. It's fine. As an example, that's fine. We can then apply this material to other things, or do whatever we want with it. Really, it's all up to you. We could even apply it to the ground if we bake everything correctly. So that's the basics. Placing stuff in, making stuff look pretty. You've got the basic materials there. you know how to texture map, you know how to apply materials. Importing stuff, pretty straightforward again. You can just click import your models in. I just wanted to do a quick demo so you guys can kind of get started importing your models in. If you do get stuck, I will be here for the next probably couple hours. I'll probably here till probably about 1, 2. I'll be sat on Google and the Facebook group anyway. But if anyone needs any help, just let me know. I'm going to stick this on Classroom and Facebook now, so if anyone gets stuck, give me a hand. Cheers!